All right, Marina, I'm here today with Marina Cvetkovic. We are going to be talking about a wide range of topics, mostly around opportunity and maybe some unseen opportunities that our audience can benefit from thinking a little bit broader about what might be happening in the world today. So thank you so much for being with me, Marina.
It's great to be here, Sara. Thank you for having me.
I also had watched your TEDx talk around how you've gamified your life, and that encouraged and inspired me to reach out to you because I feel that you might have a slightly different perspective on what's happening in the world today. So we can talk about that too.
Sure.
And I hope that people will enjoy this because they're talking to two glass half full people. So this will be a positive day. Marina, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am, I was born and raised in Belgrade, Serbia, and, moved to Zurich, Switzerland about 10 years ago, spent a lot of time there in financial services industry mostly, and then moved to New York about 4 years ago, where I discovered my passion for coaching and leadership development. And so that's what I do now.
Excellent. And when we first started talking, you were saying a bit about opportunities. Can you talk to me a little bit about your perspective on that?
Sure. Yeah, I think the first thing that I said to you, when you reached out, I said, I think this is great, but, let's please talk about the opportunity that, is coming out of this. I think we're all a little tired about, talking about the downsides of the situation, and not to kind of neglect that and underestimate that. But I think, it is being talked about enough. I think the little bit of time we have today, I would really like to talk about, what is coming out of this that is really creating more opportunity that we had before. And one of the obvious things that is, coming out of this, at least for me, given that I do consider myself, a global citizen, like I don't think I'm Serbian, Swiss, or American. I think I'm just like, really the citizen of the globe. I'm thinking like in many ways that, the world is becoming more global than ever, all of a sudden it really doesn't matter where you are. You could be in a little remote village wherever, or you could be like us in the middle of Manhattan. It really doesn't matter. Like, the opportunity and the visibility that you can have is exactly the same, which I think for the employees in the organizations is a massive shift, right? At least based on my limited experience, I've seen teleworkers in the past always kind of, being treated a little differently or having a different experience just because they're not as connected. They're missing out on events and everything that was happening kind of in person, right? And now those are not there. So all of a sudden, everyone is equal, right? And everyone has that equal opportunity, irrespective of the geography, which I think is beautiful. And for businesses, I think, again, most of them were somewhat global, but still keeping like that local or regional touch. And all of a sudden, the whole globe could be your market, right? Because you can touch anyone, it doesn't really matter so much whether you have physical presence.
Mm-hmm.
If we accept that this is the new normal, which I think, most of us nowadays are starting to realize that it is, right? Then really the whole world is your market. So what does that mean?
Yeah, there's so many things in there to unpack and unfold. Let's maybe start with at the executive level, at the management level. And organizations with their leadership teams have to deal with a lot of critically important decisions that they need to be making about their businesses. How can they collectively, individually face those heavy challenges while also opening up their minds to the opportunities that are out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a very challenging situation, Sara, to be honest, right? But in many ways, it is the perfect example of what great leadership means, right? Because great leadership always means keeping one eye on the daily operations, even if that means a daily crisis, which right now we're in, and then still keeping an eye on the future and, strategy and things, monitoring the trends and the changing trends, and thinking about how that's, going to influence your business and how you need to pivot and stay, agile and flexible. So that is a challenge for a lot of businesses, especially those that were not used to agile ways of working, that are set up in ways that just do not allow for this flexibility, right? To shift to online delivery all of a sudden, or, virtual delivery of whatever services they were delivering in person. A lot of businesses are struggling. But in many ways, what is happening right now, it just those changes are now needed sooner than they would have been, but they would have been needed anyway at some point in the future, right? We knew that was the future, right? Having lean structures, thinking in a more agile, flexible manner, even just about, the way you're thinking about your talent, right? Starting to think about talent as a pool of, agile, talented people that you could, employ the way they're needed, and not necessarily just, according to the job description that, you wrote and you had in mind 5 years ago or 10 years ago, right? So
Yeah.
I would say the more that they can embrace agile ways of working and start to shift the org structure as well and their processes to allow for that, the better off they'll be, because that's the biggest obstacle.
I can certainly see an opportunity for organizations that have perhaps lagged behind some of these trends that you're talking about. They've been forced to fast track that a bit, and all businesses to be thinking about what is the progressive next right on the horizon that we can see, and just push a little bit towards that. Even though it's uncomfortable, we know, like you said, this is what's happening. So let's try to move in that direction.
Yeah, getting ahead is a challenge, because I think right now everyone just feels like we're barely catching up with what just happened to us, right? But hopefully, by this time, we are kind of at that point where we're sort of caught up with what happened, and now shifting towards let's get ahead. Let's really pivot based on what we think is going to happen 6 to 12 months to perhaps even 2-3 years down the line, right? In terms of our business models and our customers.
Absolutely. You also mentioned something early on when you were talking about the equality of the remote worker now. And I think you're right. I actually, my entire career, have spent part of my career working remotely, and then the other part working in the office with my colleagues. And we're a small business, but I have seen a tremendous shift in a level playing field. Even our all hands meeting, everybody, like you said, it doesn't matter where you are. All I see is your face in a box. And so now you're on the same level as everybody else. And so there's more willingness to come forward and speak and to share a little bit more. That's been a really beautiful outcome of what I've seen happen. And that's on a very small scale. And I really was intrigued by what you were saying of the global opportunity that exists for employees and for businesses as a result.
Yeah, I really think so. I mean, we'll see, but that's what I'm sensing, and I think it is exciting. Even when you think about something as little as happy hours, right? I mean, happy hours were always like whoever is in the office on that day, right? Otherwise, you're missing out. And now all of a sudden you can dial in from your cozy home, wherever that is, and still connect and not miss out on those kind of more personal connections, right? So I think it's great.
What other lessons have you seen, or positive points can you point out for us as we're dealing with this situation? We were talking about that before too, of that it maybe is a little harder to look for those positives. They are out there.
For sure. I mean, and I think all of us, at least for the first few weeks, we're just like drowning in this shock of like what is happening, and hopefully we are kind of starting slowly to come out of it mentally more than anything, right? And I think, you and I were also discussing it's, as coaches, right? We talk about the circle of influence, and there's only so much that one can influence, and you can be cautious and careful and follow the rules, but there's not much more you can do beyond that. So why wouldn't we redirect the energy into something that is positive, that could create beautiful things? I think one interesting thing that I've observed, Sarah, is, and I think we briefly talked about this before, you know, we're talking about unemployment, right? Which in the US is really scary. The numbers are scary. But at the same time, I'm seeing, so many professionals who have a job, right? Taking this time to reflect on their own career and their own journey, and question themselves, ask themselves, like, is this really where I want to go? What does a purposeful career mean to me? Just kind of inspired by the current environment, but also just the fact that they have this extra time and space to do that self-reflection, right? Which I think is definitely, if you think about it, is a positive thing coming out of this, because otherwise we're all just rushing for the next thing. Before we know it, we're like, it's very late in our career, and it's maybe even too late to make a change, right? So I'm so excited and so happy when I see young professionals taking this time to reflect and pivot if needed, because what a great way to approach this situation, right?
Mm. Yeah, you had mentioned this before too, and I do think that this is an important thing to maybe just stop and pause and reflect on in terms of the opportunities for your own individual career, and then also to be able to open your mind to more opportunities or possibilities than you thought were ever imaginable, because of the fact that we're all experiencing very similar things. So some are experiencing much worse, some are experiencing much better, but the factors that we're facing, the contributing factors, are all very similar. And so that creates a opportunity and a bond that maybe wasn't there before. The disparity was maybe more.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I think so. And I think, yeah, I think, definitely the bond is stronger. And I mean, LinkedIn, if you check your newsfeed, it's all over our LinkedIn, like how grateful people are for like this newfound humanity in professional connections, right? We used to be like, trying to stay strictly professional, avoid home environment if at all possible, because it's not professional to dial in from home, and now all of a sudden, like, all of that doesn't matter, and so the bond is definitely stronger than ever, I would argue, and I'm also seeing an interesting thing, like, of companies who really are stepping up during this time. There is also a different level of loyalty that employees are feeling for those employers, right? Because when companies step up in such a difficult time, that's something that employees, current, future employees, will remember for a long time, right? And I mean, it's your line of work, but how important employer reputation is, right?
Yeah.
And so we've seen that, right? Those that are not, they're all over the news. For those there are, it's an investment in the future, right? Because I think it's going to
Absolutely.
impact the employer brand on a long-term basis, like really positively.
Yeah. And I think it's only just been a short few years where organizations have been thinking about, okay, what is our purpose? What are our, for a long time, businesses have thought about values, but it's been largely talk, and this an opportunity, a circumstance where they've had to put that into action. And so I do think that we're going to be moving from defining what your purpose is to more demonstrating and living it. And I'm excited to see that in action, because I think that's going to make it a much more tangible experience for employees and for businesses connecting with their customers, et cetera.
Exactly. It was almost, if you like, almost like a perfect test of like everything that, companies were saying they're standing for. Well, usually the good times are not the times where you can really like, see that, right? It's easy to be all those things when things are going well, right? So So I think it's going to be an interesting differentiator in the market as well going forward, right? And all of us just thinking about our future employment and careers, like that becomes all of a sudden one of the important factors you're considering, right? Because I think we're
Absolutely.
going to remember this for a long time, and that's when you start looking at job security in a totally different way, right? So
Yeah.
definitely a differentiator.
Okay, so my last couple of questions. Your TED talk is wonderful. I hope that everybody will go and check it out. But you basically talk about gamification of life and how you've gamified your life personally. And in so many ways, this does not seem like the time to be playing games with our lives. But what are your thoughts about that? What are the opportunities there?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I mean, I am definitely, I'll be very honest, like my gamer mind was quiet for a long time because I was also under stress, right? And that's what I'm exactly talking about in my talk. Like, there's no way to play when you're stressed or fearful, right? Just those two do not go together, right? Um, but when I kind of let go of that fear and embrace what is, that's when my mind started opening up to the opportunity. And I think that's exactly, like, the more we are able to embrace the current situation and let go of fear, understanding that there's not much we can influence anyway, the more we'll open ourselves up to the opportunity that is always there. Like, there's always opportunities out there. It is us who are seeing or not seeing it, right? That defines whether the opportunity is there.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful place to end. Thank you so much for being here with me. I really appreciated talking with you.
Thanks, Sarah. I enjoyed it very much.